my shoes and out the door. 5, I'm alive. 6, 7, 8, feeling great.
Hello, BYWG tribe. Here's a quick peek at our supplement, product, and book of the month for November 2019. At the end of the podcast, I will spend a few minutes going into further detail, so we encourage you to check it out. The supplement of the month for November 2019 is our hot off the press, newly formulated and newly released Beyond Your Wildest Genes Immune Boost, with the 10% discount code for the month of November being lowercase I, lowercase b, 10. Yes, it's case sensitive, IB10. The product of the month for November is Dr. Cowan's Garden, nutrient-dense, all-organic vegetable powders. 20% off first-time buyers using the code capital B, capital Y, capital W, capital G. The book of the month for November is Own Yourself, The Surprising Path Beyond Depression, Anxiety, and Fatigue to Reclaiming Your Authenticity, Vitality, and Freedom by one of our favorites, Dr. Kelly Brogan. Keep in mind, all the links, discount codes, and special offers for the product, supplement, and book will be listed in the show notes in iTunes, posted on social media, and in our weekly newsletter and on our website at www.beyondyourwildestgenes.com at the Listen Now tab. Thanks for listening. Hello and welcome back to Beyond Your Wildest Genes podcast. My name is Dr. Noah DeCoyer and I'm your host. Today our guest is Dr. Tom Cowan. Dr. Cowan, you have been one of my biggest virtual mentors in shaping how I view health and wellness, so I'm super excited to have you back on the podcast for a second time to discuss your newest book, Cancer and the New Biology of Water. So I encourage you all to go back in our podcast archives to listen to our first podcast, which I believe was December 18th, 2017. So Doc, let me do your bio and then we'll get started. Dr. Cowan has studied and written about many subjects in medicine, including heart, autoimmune disease, nutrition, anthroposophical medicine, and herbal medicine. He's the author of Human Heart, Cosmic Heart, Vaccines and Autoimmunity, and the Changing Nature of Childhood Illness, and Cancer and the New Biology of Water, all published by Chelsea Green, as well as the principal author of the Fourfold Path to Healing and co-author with Sally Fallon of the Nourishing Traditions book of Baby and Childcare. Dr. Cowan has served as Vice President of the Physicians Association for Anthroposophic Medicine and is founding board member of the Weston A. Price Foundation. He also writes the Ask the Doctor column and the Healing Arts Weston A. Price Quarterly Magazine. He has lectured throughout the United States and Canada. In 2016, he and his family launched Dr. Cowan's Garden, a company that makes and sells organic vegetable powders to help people diversify their vegetable consumption. He has 3 grown children and lives and practices medicine in San Francisco. So before I just get into the questions, let me first say that I love the new book. And your most recent interview on Dr. Mercola's site was fantastic. So if anybody wants more information, check that out. I've been using Dr. Cowan's Garden product for almost 2 years. And I'm also a huge fan of Dr. Zach Bush, who we also interviewed, who did the preamble of the book. Shameless plug for his product Restore, which I credit that as the key to eliminating my seasonal allergies. Okay, Dr. Cowan, let's get right into the new book. Why a book on cancer?
So I didn't know this when I started out, but it turns out I was writing a series of 3 books basically on the biology of water. So this was the 3rd of the series. I mean, they can be read independently. But the reason for the cancer is primarily because in the United States, since 1971, when Richard Nixon announced the war on cancer, and he said, we're going to spend as much money as we can to try to solve this. And the prediction was that cancer will be eliminated in 10 years. So that would be 1981. And it's been hard to get a number of how much money was spent, but I think it's in the trillions. My editor thought it was in the hundreds of billions, so it's anyways a lot of money. And then as we all know, cancer is not only not eliminated, but it's worse than ever. And then when the Australian government commissioned a study in 2004 looking at the contribution of chemotherapy, which is the main treatment for cancer that's not surgical or radiation, they said that there was a 2.3% improvement as a result of chemotherapy. So if you think of that as a return on hundreds of billions of dollars of investment, it's not a very good one.
No.
And so reason I wrote the book is because there's a lot of people thinking, well, what went wrong here? Cancer's a wily foe and, a lot of stuff. But my conclusion was it's because we announced that we understood the cause of cancer in 71. And I think that the announced cause is, frankly, flat out wrong.
Well, let me pull this quote right from the book, and because this is where you're heading. This comes directly from the book. In fact, I have it in my hands. What if hundreds, even thousands of somatic mutations that have now been found associated with cancer cells are not the cause of cancer, but are a symptom of underlying processes that have led to the degeneration of the cellular environment? I think that's where you're heading, right, Dr. Cowan?
Right. We announced in 71 that we knew the cause of cancer, which was somatic mutations, or the so-called oncogene theory. And what that means is, if you think of the cell, it has two parts. It has a cytoplasm and it has a nucleus. And in the nucleus are chromosomes, which have genes on them, and the genes code for proteins. And the theory of cancer was there was a mutation in one of the somatic, which is not the X or a Y chromosome, and that created a bad product, a bad protein, so to speak, and that bad protein fueled cancer. In the beginning, the hope was one of two things. One, that all prostate or breast cancer or pancreatic cancer had the same mutation, so that was one hope. The other was, if any particular person has a particular unique mutation, and that's what their tumor is about. It turns out neither of those are true. In fact, every cancer cell has anywhere between, say, 2 or 3 and 50,000 different somatic mutations. And every prostate cancer has different mutations, and every person's tumor, cell A in the tumor has 6 mutations, cell B has 400, cell C has 2,000, etc. So the whole thing just became a whole bunch of nonsense, really.
Can you explain, removing the nucleus of a healthy cell, putting into a cancer cell, removing the nucleus of a cancer cell, putting into a healthy cell? You know where I'm headed with that. Could you explain that whole idea to kind of prove what we're discussing right now?
Right. So again, the theory is somatic mutations. This is a genetic problem. We've all heard that. That's why there's the biotech industry. That's why everybody in cancer research studies the different genes. But here's another way to look at this. So you have a cytoplasm, that's the watery part. Then you have a nucleus, that's where the genes are. You take a healthy cytoplasm and a healthy nucleus, and you transplant the nucleus of one into the cytoplasm of the other, and the progeny are healthy. But then you take a cancer cell, and you take the nucleus out of that, that's where the cancer supposedly lies, and you put that in a healthy cytoplasm, and the progeny are healthy. And then you do the opposite. You take a healthy cytoplasm, or a healthy cell, and you take the nucleus out of that, so that's supposedly a healthy nucleus, and you put that into a cancerous cytoplasm, and the progeny are cancerous. And that tells you, without any shadow of a doubt, and I have the references for the studies, it's been done over and over again, that the location of the defect in cancer is in the cytoplasm, not the nucleus. And the analogy that I like to give to people, because I like to speak in ways that people can understand, it's like you come upon a person looking for something under the streetlight, and you look for a minute, try to help them, and then you say, "What are you looking for?" He says, "I'm looking for my keys." And you look for a minute, and you say, "Where'd you lose them?" He says, "Over there in the bushes." And then you say, "Well, why are you looking under the streetlight?" He said, "Because the light's better." And so just because the light's better, just because we know how to study genes, it turns out that's not where your keys are. They're in the cytoplasm.
And like why? I think I know the answer. Why isn't that study plastered all over? And why is that study not enough to change the current dogma that we have right now?
Well, it's not a study, it's multiple studies.
Multiple.
And, what's interesting is when you read the conclusion of the studies, because people are we're blinded by myths. We humans are storytellers. The story is it's genetic. So the conclusion of some of these researchers is, well, there must be something in the cytoplasm that can heal the mutations, which is, it's ludicrous, frankly, but because they don't know what that is. But even when they do the research and prove that the problem is in the cytoplasm, they think, well, the cytoplasm must have fixed the nucleus. So anyways, why? So here's my answer to that. Because when you start getting into what is the cytoplasm and how does the cytoplasm function, you start understanding that our whole conception of biology is flawed. And that's frankly too big of a philosophical shift for most people to do right now, particularly scientists who have literally bet the farm on the notion that living things are only made out of substance. And what I mean by that is that's what we learn in medical school. I'm trained as a medical doctor. We study substance. And again, because I like to talk in analogies, it's like trying to understand the Mona Lisa painting. But the rules of the game are you're only allowed to investigate the paint and the canvas. You're not allowed to think about who painted this, why did he paint it, or what his idea was of painting this. And so you get your microscope out and you pretend that you can understand how this painting came about by understanding the paint. Now, I would admit that the paint is relevant. If you don't have yellow, you can't make a brilliant painting, I guess. And I think even Da Vinci was interested in the quality of his colors and the quality of his paint, of his canvas. But the brilliance of the Mona Lisa came out of the mind and heart of Da Vinci. And the brilliance of the human being is not in the substance. And the cytoplasm is basically structured spiritually. It's the interface of the spirit with water working through the substance. And that's not a concept that we have in science. So we don't get the cytoplasm, and so we can't see it.
So tell our audience, give our audience a little bit more about the cytoplasm and what, the fourth stage of water or structured water actually is.
Okay, so, and let me give direct this to the cancer thing,
Yes.
question, because that's what the book is about.
Right.
So if you just get out of one's sort of scientific quote head and say, what do you see with cancer? Well, you see that it's harder and i.e. more dense than the rest of the tissue. The usual example is if you feel a breast, it feels one way. Feel breast feels the same way. Then you feel this tumor and it feels like a rock in the breast. Why does it feel like a rock? It feels like a rock because there's too many cells in the same amount of area. So it's an increased density of cells. And so then you have to ask the question, what determines the density of the cells? In other words, cells have a spatial orientation to each other. Interestingly, so do people. And when I'm sitting with a patient, I sit like 6 feet away. And if I sat 1 inch from their nose, the whole thing would change, right? Because that's not how you communicate with other human beings. Same with each tissue has a certain density, has a certain spatial orientation. With cancer, it's lost. So the question is, how does this spatial orientation come about? And this has been a question that biologists and scientists and medical doctors have been interested for centuries. And they came to the conclusion that there is a charge around the cell. So imagine a negative charge around the cell, and with two similarly negative charged cells in, say, your liver come together, they repel each other and keep their distance. And the spatial orientation is a function of the strength of the charge. So liver cells have one strength and eye a different, etc. So where does this charge come from? It comes from the fact that all cells, all mammalian cells, including humans, pump sodium out of the cell and collect potassium inside the cell. And that's another question. And there's been Nobel Prizes awarded for the elucidation of how the cell gets rid of sodium and collects potassium. It's done by the sodium-potassium pump. That creates a charge around the cell. A charged cell is a living cell. A dead cell, there's no ability to keep their spatial orientation, so they clump together and form a tumor, right? That's how cancer forms. The problem, like a lot of things in medicine, and this was figured out by a guy named Gilbert Ling, is if you measure the amount of energy required to do this pumping of sodium out and collecting potassium, it's about 30 times more than the cell energy than the cell has to do everything. So it's like having a $30,000 a month mortgage and your salary is $2,000. It won't work. So then the question is, and people may not appreciate how revolutionary that understanding is. This is not because of a pump in the membrane. So how does it happen? It happens because all of the water in the cell is so-called structured water. Now, what do I mean by that? We're told that water, any matter, any substance, can only exist in three phases: solid, liquid, gas. So, solid copper, molten copper, gaseous copper. With water, it's ice, water, steam. But what about Jell-O? Which one is that? It's obviously not ice, and it's not water, and it's not steam. And so it turns out there is a previously unrecognized fourth phase of water, which some people call easy water or structured water. And it's a certain mesh, like a mosquito netting on your window. It turns out that by some literal miracle of nature, and the very reason why water is the medium of life, is that the sized mesh of this structured water, by the size, attaches and collects the potassium and excludes the sodium, no energy required. That means that this charge, the literal basic reason a cell can do anything, the reason our nerves work, the reason our heart works, everything dependent on this electrical charge of our being, is because of this structuring of water in the cell. That's what a cytoplasm is. It's just a collection of structured water.
Wow. So here's the zillion-dollar question. How do we increase or keep the integrity of the structured water in our cells or the cytoplasm?
So the next question, that's sort of the question, well, how does this structured water form?
Right.
I mean, interestingly, it forms the same way you make Jell-O. You take water, you put a protein in it called gelatin, and then you heat up the protein, and then it attaches to the water, and then when you cool it, it forms a gel. Now, what does the heating do? So the gelatin proteins, like in a can, are folded up into, like, let's say, little balls. When you heat them, you unfold the proteins so that they then can attach to the water and then form the gel. And that's the exact same thing that happens in a human cell. You have proteins, which we think are actin, and there's water, and the proteins need to be unfolded. They then interact with the water and create the gel. Now, here's an important point. So what plays the role of the heat? Because obviously you can't put a Bunsen burner in your liver and heat up the proteins to get them to unfold. And it turns out the answer to that dispels another fundamental myth in biology and medicine, which is it turns out that ATP, the so-called energy molecule, which actually has nothing to do with energy, but what it does do is it attaches to the ends of the protein, and that causes them to unfold and then attach to the water. So if you have an ATP deficiency, you can't unfold the proteins, and your water mesh structure will become dysfunctional. You won't be able to exclude sodium and collect potassium, and then you will have a uncharged cell that basically loses its connection to its surroundings, and that's what we call cancer. So there's a lot of things now that determine whether the structure of the cytoplasm is healthy or not. And here's a very simple experiment so that people can conceptualize this. So you take a beaker of water, right, and you suspend a horizontal hydrophilic tube in the water. Now, this is actually what I wrote about in my heart book years ago. It turns out that the interaction of a hydrophilic tube and water, so because all water gels are negatively charged, so it forms hydrophilic tube and water, forms a negatively charged gel lining the tube, and that pushes the positive charges, the protons, into the water part, the liquid water. There's the water part in the middle of the tube is full of these protons, which then repel each other and start the flow of the water. That's exactly how the blood flows in our body, because of these repellent forces of the protons. So you can use that system to answer your question, what helps us structure the water? Because the stronger the flow, the more structured the water is. So you take that system, you put it in a lead box, and the flow stops. You take it out of the lead box, and you shine the sunlight on it, and it starts to flow more. That means there's more structured water, separation of charges. You put that beaker of water on the earth, directly in contact with the earth, it starts to flow more. You put your hands on it, it starts to flow more. You put your dog next to it, it starts to flow more. You shine far infrared light on it, it starts to flow more. And then you put your cell phone next to it, and it stops flowing, because it denatures the structure of the water, and therefore you can guarantee that exposure to cell phone electromagnetic radiation is a powerful destructure of your water and therefore carcinogenic.
You know, this is why we call our podcast Beyond Your Wildest Genes, because you're really talking about just lifestyle and life. Am I wrong by saying cancer is caused by lifestyle in a way? Is that what you're saying?
Cancer is caused by a deterioration of the structure of the water in your cytoplasm.
Right. Caused by
what causes that is a disconnection from the earth and the sun and human beings and the natural world, and a increased exposure to, aluminum and glyphosate, all these things which you can see, it stops the flow. If you put wireless electromagnetic field next to any water structure, you will deteriorate the structure, therefore no flow, circulation becomes compromised, the charge of the cell, the very essence of life, becomes compromised, the ability of cells to assume a healthy spatial orientation becomes compromised. And it turns out, without a shadow of a doubt, that the water structure in the nucleus, because even the nucleus has a little bit of water in it, that's structured water, and that determines the expression of the DNA. So even down into the very details of why do you get poor expression of the DNA, it's because the water surrounding the DNA exposes the wrong parts or deteriorates the structure of the DNA. That's why cancer cells have so many mutations. It's not because they have, it's because their protective water coating doesn't protect it because it's disoriented, it's destructured, and therefore you have all these mutations which then make the problem worse, right? So once you have mutations, then nothing works. But they're not the cause. They're a result of the inability of the water part of the nucleus to maintain a healthy structure of the DNA.
Let me just summarize that again. Page 27. Health is the state of perfect intracellular gels. Disease is when the gel state deteriorates. It is then no wonder that good food, healthy water, sunshine, interaction with the earth, love, and acceptance, all of which produce healthier and more robust intracellular gel, improve our health. In contrast, interaction with glyphosate, electromagnetic fields, and toxic chemicals deteriorate our gels and makes us sick.
Right.
So what are some practical steps, maybe some potential therapies? You know, where do we go? Where does the person, like what action steps does the person take once they read this book?
So one of the things I did was to outline then the history of natural medicines for cancer and show how each one of them in their own way, even though the person who originated the therapy, like the Gerson therapy, he said, the Gerson therapy has been very successful for treating cancer. And if you ask Gerson, what were you trying to do? He said, I was trying to restore the healthy sodium-potassium balance in the cell. He didn't even know where that came from. He just knew that if you give somebody lots of potassium and didn't give them any sodium and detoxified their cells, that they might get better. And he was right. My point of this book is once you understand how all these things work, you can actually make a rational therapy and a rational strategy for life, like walking on the beach in the sunshine, holding the hand of somebody you love. That already is a huge improvement over just about anything else we do. And so, so there's a whole lot of dissection of what has worked in the past and why it worked through this lens. Quinton water, which is structured seawater, and deuterium depleted water, which is the proper kind of water, and, on and on and on. So it's full of looking at practical suggestions. What kind of water do we want? And the energy that structures the water. You have to see it from both sides.
Right. I love that part of the book. I gotta be honest, out of all of the things you go into, mistletoe therapy fascinates me more than just about any of the other ones.
Mistletoe therapy came from Steiner, who I pay attention a lot to. And, again, so he said, what's the problem of cancer? Steiner said, it's a problem of the etheric body. What's the etheric body? It's the water body. Fine. Okay. So what's the treatment? The treatment is mistletoe restores the health of the etheric body. Well, that's what we're looking for. So you give people mistletoe, and, I have cases in there of people who got better.
I got,
But it's all just the same. It's just once you, I mean, this may sound a little arrogant, but I was looking for a unified theory of health and disease. And I mean, I don't know if I got it, but I thought I did. So there it is. And then you can see the lens of everything else. You put energy in with acupuncture and it helps structure your water.
Right.
So yeah.
I was just gonna say, you pulled on my heartstrings in there because there's a story of someone with 4th-stage colon cancer that metastasized to their liver that I believe they recovered or recovering successfully with the use of mistletoe therapy, and it's in the book. But 15, 16 years ago, Dr. Cowan, my mother died of colon cancer that metastasized to her liver. So
yeah, it's a woman who was like young 30s, I think, and I think it's 10 to 12 years, and that's what she did, mistletoe therapy, and she's alive and well and disease-free.
And that diagnosis of colon to liver is nearly not. There's really no recovery to that one, and she's
Right.
doing it. So, alrighty. So because I want to touch upon Dr. Cowan's garden, and I absolutely am fascinated by your thoughts. I have a few rapid fire thoughts that I'd like to put you on the spot. And if you don't feel like answering them or they're too long, please just pass them. But the first one is ketogenic diets.
Ketogenic diet is mainly of interest to me because it's very clear that what happens with a ketogenic diet is you create deuterium-depleted water in your cells, and deuterium-depleted water is the healthiest water and the easiest for your body to structure. So it's not really about starving your body of carbohydrates or lowering your blood sugar because, as I point out, ketogenic diets don't even lower the blood sugar low enough to make any difference. But what they do is produce deuterium-depleted water, which then gets structured and produces these healthy cytoplasms.
Right. And I would say because of your knowledge in Weston A. Price and your knowledge of ancestral diets, what's your thoughts on the carnivore diet?
I haven't ever done that myself. I like plants too much.
I know, me too.
And it doesn't appeal to me.
Okay, fair enough. How about CBD hemp products? It's a wild, wild west out there.
To me, the experience that I've seen as a doctor, people doing that is mostly, it's been very disappointing what I've seen as the results.
Okay.
So, I don't know.
And because this is in a lot of your writings, what does fourfold healing mean?
Fourfold healing is a concept essentially I stole from Steiner that, Western biology, Western medicine, conventional medicine says we have one body, we're made of substance. Again, another analogy, it's like you go to a house and it's this amazing house. How did this house get built? And the answer is because it has great bricks. And the bricks form themselves into a house, which obviously is ridiculous. Of course, you need bricks, and even it's good to have good bricks, because if you have crappy bricks, you build a crappy house. But the entire interest of the house is the mind and the heart and the insight of the architect. That's what builds the house. So fourfold, it means this, again, this is lifted from Steiner. We don't just have a physical body. We're not just made of bricks. We have a water body, we have an air body, and we have a warmth body. And when you study the human being in that sense, you can understand a lot more about what really happens instead of what we're told is supposed to happen.
Very good, very good. Now, anything else you want to say about the book that I missed or that you think the audience needs to hear?
except to go and get it.
That's it.
And send me feedback.
Yeah,
Send me feedback. You know, the most fun thing about writing a book is people have their own take on either how this applies to them or they know some interesting research. You know, somebody sent me an article a week after the book came out that they had been involved with some Swedish National Institute proving that the three-dimensional structure of the DNA is a result of the water that the DNA is embedded in. And another guy then sent me, you know, that if you expose water to either a vortex, which helps structure it, or plane,
That's
or
okay.
or a baby monitor, that you get a hugely different growth pattern in the roots of like a pea plant. If you expose it to vortexed water, you get vigorous, healthy roots. Plain water, sort of medium. Put your baby monitor next to the water and then water your pea plant with it, and the roots are distorted and sickly.
I gotta ask you. I gotta ask you about that quickly, because I've been creating a vortex in my 2 glasses of water that I drink in the morning now for like 6 months. That's likely a pretty good idea, right?
Yes, I do that myself. I have a vortexing, quote, device that I put all the water that we drink through that, and then I put a cap or two full of Quinton isotonic, it's basically vortex seawater, and then I put that water in the refrigerator in a Flaska water bottle.
Okay. Yeah, I got to step up on game a little bit on that. So yes, the link will be.
My point is to not be like abstract about this. Like, this is not to be kept in the idea realm, right? I tell people in like gory detail what to do. Yeah. Because if you don't bring it down into the here's what I'm going to do differently, then it doesn't mean anything.
Right. Yeah, it's all about in the action and taking action for sure. The link for the book will be in everything we do for the the show notes, everything. So you'll be able to grab it there, check it out, and it's on Amazon and all those kind of things. Dr. Cowan, can you talk a little bit about Dr. Cowan's garden? Like I mentioned in the beginning, I use your powders. That was our first conversation we had, all about the powders. There will be a 20% discount code for first-time buyers. It's capital B, capital Y, capital W, capital G. The link for Dr. Cowan's garden will also be in the show notes. How about a small commercial about what Dr. Cowan's garden is?
So, as you said, I've been interested in traditional diets for, 40 years, lived in Africa myself for 2 years, and I became convinced that traditional people ate about 110 different vegetables per year and about 10 to 15, or plants, not vegetables, and about 10 to 15 per day. So being a food fanatic and a gardener that I am, I set out to eat 110 different ones, including perennial ones and wild ones and annuals and roots and leaves and stems and fruits and this color and that color. And over time, I got pretty close. That's a lot, but I had to grow a lot of them. And then I jokingly said I was going to require all the patients who come to me to eat 100 different plants per year, and at least 20% of them to be wild or perennial. And then I would have been down to about 3 patients after 6 months. So I decided that wasn't not a very practical approach, except if we somehow, or I or somebody, grew them, and then we basically took them as if I would eat them. So we steam kale, and others are raw and some are steamed. Peppers are raw, and dry them at that stage. Put them in these purple mirin jars, which preserve the freshness and the energy, and so people it would be no harder to eat, perennial vegetables and different, 80 to 100 than it is to open a box of Kellogg's cornflakes. So if you can't do it with supplementing your usual vegetable consumption with Dr. Cowan's Garden, because you can get vegetables like ashitaba and wild ramps, and you can get 3 different, a root vegetable and a leaf vegetable and a flower vegetable or fruit vegetable all in one jar. So next thing you know, you've eaten 10 vegetables just because you added it to soup and oatmeal and eggs and everything else. So it was my way of making what I think is a traditional diet accessible to people. So now I have 6 patients instead of 3. I'm kidding.
I love them. Some of my favorites are leek and the horseradish powder. I have not got the ashitaba powder yet. That'll be next. I used the burdock root.
Yeah.
I really
Right.
I've used what are the little buds? The cactus buds.
Choya buds.
Choya buds. I enjoyed those. So I really, 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 really like it. Final 2 questions. What's your daily routine from waking to sleeping?
I wake up, drink some water. I have a few things that I usually take. Some of them are experimental stuff. Then I usually go outside, do a little exercise outside, movement, I would call it. Then I handle whatever email stuff I have to do. And my best days, I don't do the email stuff. I just drink something and we go to the garden and I spend the next 4 hours working in our garden. Working in quotes because it's just messing around really. Planting stuff and harvesting and weeding and whatever. And then I process food a lot. So I eat a lot. And then I process food. I make pickles. I make strawberry puree. I dry bitter melon fruits. I make soups and bread from our own, I grind the heirloom berries and make bread out of it. And then I go to bed.
I got bitter melon seeds from a patient of mine, so I will be growing them this year. So I'm really excited about that. The best way to eat those, in your opinion?
They're a little rough, but you get the medium-sized fruit, slice them horizontally, scoop the seeds out.
Okay.
Cut them up about 1/4 to 1/2 inch wide.
Okay.
And then salt it for about an hour because that takes some of the bitterness out. Then you rinse them under water and then you can put them in anything. It's still a little yucky. So we're going to do bitter melon, I think, and actually we're going to make an exception because every other powder we make is for food. But bitter melon is an amazing medicinal plant, food.
Right.
B, it's a little rough. It's not exactly the best tasting thing I've ever eaten. So we may even end up putting those in capsules. But that's the best way to do it.
Cool. Thanks for that. So any last words?
Just appreciate your having me on your show and for all your support. And I hope people take a look and I hope people give me feedback.
Great. The link to the book and Dr. Cowan's Garden will be in the show notes. Remember, 20% off first-time buyers using capital B, capital Y, capital W, capital G. My name is Dr. Noah DeCoyer, your co-host, and you are listening to the Beyond Your Wildest Genes podcast. If you like what you've heard today, please share this with your friends and family and encourage them to subscribe on iTunes. You can sign up for our incredible weekly email at www.beyondyourwildestgenes.com. Thank you, and as my oldest son Hayden says, be awesome and never unawesome. It's Dr. Noah, and I'm back. I suspect you loved listening to this week's podcast release. So, the book of the month, as mentioned, for November 2019 is Own Yourself by our favorite, or one of our favorites, Dr. Kelly Brogan. You can listen to Dr. Mike interview Dr. Brogan on September 30th in the podcast archives on our website at www.beyondyourwildestgenes.com. The supplement of the month for November 2019 is BYWG's Nutrition's Immune Boost. This supplement is the newest in a growing line of premium nutritional supplements formulated by your BYWG team. Are you feeling unwell? Is everyone around you sick? Do you need a boost? Then this supplement is for you. Immune Boost is a unique combination of vitamins, minerals, mushrooms, antioxidants, and herbs to give your immune system the boost it needs, especially during the cooler months. For the month of November, the 10% discount code is IB10. In the archive, you can listen to a comprehensive review of all our supplements, and in November, one podcast release will be dedicated solely to Immune Boost. The product of the month for November is Dr. Cowan's Garden, nutrient-dense, all-organic vegetable powders. These powders are a clear and direct way to nutritional diversity. I've been using them and loving them since I interviewed Dr. Cowan for the podcast. You can listen to this in our podcast archives on December 18th, 2017. In fact, I'm interviewing Dr. Cowan again with a release date in November. If you're a first-time buyer and you love the product and you want to try it, the code is capital B, capital Y, capital W, capital G. You will receive 20% off your first purchase. Like I said, I love these powders, and I love the Myron jars they come in. Some of my favorite powders are leek, horseradish, and burdock, and they even have unique things like turmeric and ashitaba, so check it out. Remember, 20% off first-time buyers using the code capital B, capital Y, capital W, capital G. Thank you for your time. Thank you for listening, and be awesome and never unawesome.